If you've ever run your fingers across a tree stump, you know the ritual. You count the rings. You guess the age. Maybe you notice one band so thin it nearly disappears, or a dark scar swallowed by new wood, and then you move on. Most of us were taught to see that pattern as a simple clock. This many rings, this many years, a quiet life measured in circles. But that is the thinnest possible reading of what you're looking at. Because ancient trees do not just mark time, they record pressure, they record fear, they record fire, drought, insect attack, freezing nights, sudden abundance, unstable ground, bad air, and in some cases, even violent events from space. What looks like a passive stack of wooden lines is often a survival archive, and once you see that, an old tree stops looking like scenery. It starts looking like memory made visible. It's easy to miss because human beings are biased toward movement. If it runs, cries out, or changes expression, we assume something important is happening. If it stands still, we assume very little is going on. Trees pay a price for that bias. Their stillness gets mistaken for absence. Their silence gets mistaken for simplicity. So when people say, "It's just a tree ring," that assumption makes sense. It's also profoundly incomplete. In seasonal climates, those rings are created by a thin layer of living tissue just under the bark called the cambium. This is where new wood is produced. And that wood is not laid down mechanically, like identical layers in a machine. It changes according to what the tree sensed and what it could afford. That part matters. A tree is constantly gathering information. Leaves monitor light, temperature, carbon dioxide, humidity, and damage. Roots register water, oxygen, salt, nutrients, compacted soil, and signals from microbes and neighboring roots. When water becomes scarce, the tree's chemistry shifts. One of the major players is abscisic acid, often described as a drought hormone. It helps trigger the closing of stomata, the tiny pores in leaves that let carbon dioxide in and water vapor out. That response protects the tree from drying out too fast. But it comes with a cost. Close the stomata, and you also limit photosynthesis. Less carbon comes in, less energy is available for growth, so the tree builds less wood, and the ring gets narrower. What you later see as a thin line is not just a bad year. It is the physical outcome of a whole-body emergency response. And trees do this kind of signal integration constantly. They do not have neurons or a brain in the animal sense, but they do use electrical and chemical signaling to coordinate responses across the body. Wounding can trigger rapid electrical changes through living tissues. Hormones like ethylene and jasminates help shift defense and repair. Sugars are rerouted. Growth slows in one place and accelerates in another. A tree is not conscious in the human sense, but it is highly responsive, highly informed, and deeply shaped by what it has just experienced. So the ring is not passive. The ring is a response. It is behavior made wood. That becomes even clearer when you look at how a ring is formed. In a favorable spring, trees often produce larger, thinner-walled cells known as Earlywood. They're good for moving water quickly when growth surges. Later in the season, as conditions change, the tree often makes smaller, denser cells called latewood. That darker, tighter portion of the ring can reflect a shift from rapid expansion to reinforcement. In other words, the ring is not just counting a year, it is describing how that year unfolded. Was spring generous? Was summer harsh? Did cold arrive early? Did the tree gamble on speed or retreat into caution? The anatomy can preserve those answers, and this is where the science gets almost unnervingly intimate. A tree's wood is not only structure, it is also plumbing. The xylem moves water from roots to leaves. So when a tree builds wood, it is also building a hydraulic system. Bigger water-conducting cells can move more water, but they can also be more vulnerable to failure under drought or freezing. Denser, safer wood may protect the tree, but it can be more expensive to build. So every ring carries trade-offs. Efficiency versus safety, growth versus defense. Now versus later. That is why ancient trees are such extraordinary witnesses. They are not recording events the way a camera records an image. They are recording them by being forced to respond. A human witness sees a fire. A tree survives one, and the difference shows up in the body. This idea became a science in the early 1900s when astronomer A.E. Douglas began studying tree rings and realized that ring patterns could be matched across multiple trees. A narrow year in one tree might line up with the same narrow year in another tree miles away. By overlapping these patterns, scientists could build timelines with exact calendar years attached. That field became Dendrochronology, and institutions like the University of Arizona's Laboratory of Tree Ring Research turned it into one of the most powerful ways we have to reconstruct the past. Not just the age of trees. The history of landscapes. A living tree can be matched with dead wood. Dead wood can be matched with older, preserved wood. In some places, especially with species like bristlecone pine, scientists have built chronologies stretching back thousands of years. Long before weather stations, long before written local records, trees were already keeping track. And what they kept track of is astonishing. A run of unusually narrow rings across many trees can reveal a major drought. In fact, tree ring reconstructions have shown that parts of North America experienced ancient megadroughts far longer than anything in recent memory. That matters because written history can make the present feel normal. Trees remind us that normal is often much wider and sometimes much harsher than our lifetimes suggest. Fire leaves records too. If a tree is injured by flames but survives, later growth can seal over the wound, preserving a scar in the wood. Dendrochronologists can often date that fire to the exact year, sometimes even the season. Suddenly, a blackened wedge inside a trunk becomes more than damage. It becomes evidence, a timestamp from a forest that burned and lived. Storms and slope failures can be written in wood as well. When a tree is tilted by wind, snow load, avalanche, or unstable ground, it may produce special wood on one side of the trunk to pull or push itself back into a safer position. The trunk becomes uneven because the tree is literally engineering its own recovery. The record is not just that something happened. The record includes the answer. Insects leave signatures too. In conifers, attacks can trigger the formation of traumatic resin ducts, tiny structures associated with sticky chemical defense. Those ducts can remain visible in the wood. What looks like a minor anatomical detail is actually a trace of alarm, signaling, and defense deployment. Even the chemistry inside the ring can tell a story. Ratios of stable isotopes in the cellulose, especially carbon and oxygen, can help scientists infer things like moisture conditions, rainfall patterns, and how tightly a tree was closing its stomata. The tree is not writing a diary in sentences. It's more subtle than that. It's a layered record made of growth patterns, wood density, scars, and chemistry. Which is why scientists don't rely on one tree or one clue. They compare many trees, many sites, many signals. But the broader truth remains. The tree was not simply there, it was taking it in. And sometimes, what it took in was almost unbelievable. In 2012, researcher Fusa Miyake identified an unusual spike in carbon-14 in rings from Japanese cedar dating to the years 774 and 775. Later, the same signal was found in trees from other parts of the world. The best explanation was a massive solar particle event, a burst of high-energy radiation from the sun that altered the atmosphere and left a measurable signature in tree rings. Think about that for a second. A tree on Earth quietly recorded a storm from the sun more than 1,200 years ago. No eyes, no ears, no memory in the human sense. And yet, there it is, archived in wood. This is the emotional reframe that changes everything for me. An ancient tree does not witness by watching. It witnesses by being changed. That is what makes it feel so strangely familiar, because we do that too. We like to imagine that experience lives only in the mind, but human life is written into the body all the time. Scar tissue, posture, chronic tension, faster heartbeat around old danger, healing that never quite returns us to the shape we had before. Trees are not people, and we should be careful not to flatten biology into metaphor. But the parallel is real in one important way. Experience leaves structure behind. For a tree, that structure is literal. Cell walls, vessel size, density, resin, scars, asymmetry, chemistry. What it survived becomes part of what it is, and the story may not stop with a single event. One of the most intriguing areas of plant science is stress memory. Researchers have found that previous drought or damage can influence how plants respond later. Sometimes that shows up as altered growth, changed stomatal behavior, or shifts in gene expression. Some of these effects appear to involve epigenetic mechanisms. It changes in how genes are used without changing the DNA sequence itself. Scientists are still working out how strong and how lasting these memory effects are in different species. But the core idea is solid and important. Plants do not simply reset to zero after stress. A hard year can echo into the next one, and sometimes longer. That means an ancient tree is not just a stack of isolated seasons. It is a history of carryover, a long negotiation with place, a body shaped not only by what happened, but by what happened before. And because trees also live in communities, some of those events are not strictly private. Chemical ecology has shown that plants can release airborne compounds when attacked, and nearby plants may respond by adjusting defenses. Underground, your roots and fungal partners influence how resources and signals move through a forest. There is still a lot scientists are carefully sorting out here, and it's important not to turn the forest into a fantasy internet. But the direction is clear enough. Old trees do not live as detached wooden pillars. They live inside dense fields of information, which makes their records even more meaningful. They are individual archives inside collective worlds. Now, for the part that should make us pause. When people hear about tree rings, it can sound quaint, almost antique, like a beautiful natural clock from a slower time. But the rings forming now in many forests are not quaint at all. They are documenting heat extremes, repeated drought, smoke exposure, insect pressure, and shifting seasons in real time. In some regions, the pattern is moving outside the range that older trees spent centuries adapting to, and trees often show us distress later than we want. A forest can still look green from a distance and already be in trouble. Growth can stay suppressed after a drought ends. Hydraulic systems can be weakened. Defenses can be compromised. Bark beetles and disease often hit hardest when a tree is already stressed. By the time crowns thin and branches start dying back, the warning may have been written into the wood for years. That matters because when we lose ancient trees, we do not just lose large plants, we lose habitat, we lose shade and cooling, we lose seed sources with hard-won local adaptations. We lose carbon held over centuries, and we lose archives. A very old tree is not just biomass. It is a library that has been writing continuously for hundreds or thousands of years. Cut one down, burn it, or let a whole population disappear, and something more than wood is gone. A record vanishes. A witness disappears, which changes how you look at an old trunk, or a branch scar, or a cross-section hanging on a wall. Those are not decorative patterns. They are compressed histories. They are the visible edge of hidden intelligence, of sensing without eyes, signaling without nerves, remembering without a brain, and surviving without ever being allowed to leave. That, to me, is the real wonder of ancient trees. Not that they are old, that they have been continuously translating the world into themselves for as long as they've lived. So the next time you stand beside an old oak, a cedar, a redwood, a baobab, a pine, or even a weathered stump at the edge of a trail, try not to ask only how old it is. Ask what it has endured. Ask what dry years tightened inside it, what fires it sealed over, what storms bent it and forced it to grow back differently, what air it breathed, what summers it rationed, what recoveries it managed anyway, because beneath that bark is not emptiness and not silence. It is a long, patient act of interpretation. The tree sensed a world it could never escape, and year by year, ring by ring, it turned that world into form. If there's a tree you've known for years, or one that changed the way you see a place, tell me about it in the comments. And if you want more stories where ordinary plant life turns out to be far deeper than it looks, subscribe.